All right, welcome to the Default Profitable Podcast. You're listening to the next episode, and today we're going to focus on what it takes to start, run, and grow a marketing business. Talk about some successes, some failures, and some real-life stories from a long-term acquaintance and friend of mine. I'm your host, Matt Nettleton, and today my guest is Chris. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Hey, I was trying to think, it's one of those things a lot of people I interview I've known for a long time. I can never really think when I actually met them. We've known each other probably 20 years. Why don't you take 3 or 4 minutes, introduce yourself to everybody that's listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So, gosh, it's in Indianapolis, if you're, or really in any community, right? When you're in a certain niche and in marketing, and especially kind of when I got into this business about 15 years ago, everybody was still trying to figure it out. Digital was the new thing right now. Now it's AI, right? There's always a next and they're new. And so people kind of congregate in those communities, right? And so there's networking events and at the time, Twitter was the big thing, right? These days, there's different communities and platforms, but we all sort of were trying to figure it out together. So going to those events and being out in those places, I started back then in social digital marketing, and have since evolved. But I'm sure I very distinctly remember being I was at a B2B distributor, and I was the marketing manager there, only person doing marketing, and they were smart enough to bring me along to some Sandler sales training led by me. And so I very distinctly remember Matt kind of like running circles around some of our sales staff. But the approach was really interesting from a marketing standpoint in that Matt didn't know our product, right, but you understood the process and the thinking and how you go. So from a marketing standpoint, it was actually good to be involved in the sales part of it. And that's really kind of led where I've gone since then, is being on that sales end of how do you apply that to marketing, right? And so that was it's evolved from tools and tech and who I helped and what I did. So everything from supporting the sales staff from a go to market and all the tools and technology, to then strategy, but strategy that's informed by business goals and all those things. And then as I sort of got out of that space, and now what I'm doing is sort of back to really probably more what I was doing when I met you, is really helping companies with their marketing technology stack, right? So helping them to small business owners, team leaders, people that shouldn't be in Chat GPT every day yelling at it, people that shouldn't be in HubSpot trying to set up automations, right? People that should not be managing Google Workspaces but are spending countless hours trying to make the technology work. I'm the guy that comes in and helps fix that stuff up. So, being in the space for a long time, I've always been a technology person, and so being able to easily come in, assess the situation, feel comfortable in the settings, clicking things, and I always joke with people, I know enough to break things, I don't know enough to build them, right? But when you've broken enough things, you then figure out how to fix them, right?
Yes.
So the curve, instead of somebody like yourself having to go in and spend time on the things that you're not uniquely positioned to do, and don't necessarily, most of that stuff is a cost center to a business most times, right? You're either your time or the software licenses and those things, and
Yeah.
you should be out in your position, or other businesses, right? Typically you're doing other things, whether you're the ops person, the finance person, the sales person. You should be doing something other than technology, and that's usually the last thing, because they figure, oh, we'll just look at some help documents, and now it's like, well, we'll just go have Chat GPT do it for us, and rarely does that work out. So that's when you call in a guy
Ever.
like,
Never
yeah,
works out.
yeah, that's probably a fair assessment then, rarely, but yes.
Yeah. So what's the name of your current business?
So I called it Bullpen Consulting. Started it. So we're talking out here in middle of 25. I started it in early 24. And I originally used that phrase. One, I'm a sports fan, but really the thought process that, again, like to what you just said, it never works out when you try to go do your own thing. And so that thought of like, I've got a guy, I'm going to call a guy. It's kind of, from a sports analogy standpoint, that's what the bullpen does in baseball, right? Like
Yep.
there's 3 or 4 different types of pitchers in the bullpen depending on the situation. Some are right-handed, some are left-handed, and many times, the manager or somebody would just needs to have a person to call in, right? They just need support. They need somebody to call. They need relief, and the first thing they do is they call the bullpen in. So that's kind of how that name came about. It's just to be that resource. I've had people in a pinch texting me going, I my website's down. I can't take. I'm an online business. I can't take orders, and I'm doing them over the phone. And help them fix it in a minute. All the way to, hey, let's sit down and talk strategy about how do I grow this thing. So just that all encompassing bullpen is sort of the thought process behind the name.
All right. And what was it that led you to actually end up starting the business in early 24?
Let go from my full-time job was kind of and I've had that happen a couple times now where at least people in the marketing space, that happens a lot, right? You get let go
Yeah.
from a full-time role, whether you're downsized or for whatever reason. COVID one time got me, and so you instantly go find freelance business, you go find contracts, you just go find a way to generate revenue while you're trying to figure out what's next. Um, and so I was doing that, and after about literally the fourth or fifth time I was in the interview process, and I was talking myself out of the full-time job because I saw that they weren't going to be a good fit, and I saw what they were trying to hire for wasn't their need, and I tried to get them to hire me, some people wanna call it fractional, some people wanna, call it part-time, freelance, project, whatever, and I kept trying to get those people to bring me in to work with them, and I'm like, "Well, I'm wasting my time trying to go find a full-time job and going through somebody else's process when all I'm doing is just trying to, switch them anyways. I might as well put that energy into actually building and starting my own thing. So that's how it came about.
And, it's funny because this is about 145 episodes now. And I would say about a third of the people end up starting a business when they, unexpectedly made available to industry.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's expected that they made available to industry. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's an uncommon story. Um, as you think about the the switch from working for somebody to working for yourself, what has been the difference in your passion? Like, has are you driven by different things now?
Um, I don't know if it's by different things necessarily. I've got to think a little bit differently. I, I've always been pretty vocal and pretty sure of the right approach to a situation. So whether
Mhm.
that be a full-time role in a a roadmap, a strategy, where we're going this year, what we're doing, how we're building, what we're up to. I'm pretty strategic and visionary and see looking forward, and I don't like to spend time on things that I don't see coming to fruition or being the right path. And so that's okay in a full-time role. You can be that way. It's difficult because you have to bring everybody else along with you on the ride, or you just have to sort of ask for forgiveness and keep going. Um, it feels better when you're the one on your own to be able to say the same things. But it's also much scarier because if it doesn't, you can always blame it on somebody else when you're full time. So it's like, oh, they didn't trust my vision, or we weren't aligned, or for whatever reason, and then you can go find another job, right? You think you found somebody else that's gonna go along with you, or you connected on the way that you think about things. When it's yourself, you can still have the same passion, the same approach. But now if people don't agree with you, they're not paying you, right? So there's no
Yeah.
revenue. So you've got to figure out the needle between, where's that line between your approach and the way you're doing it versus, how Matt thinks about it, or if I'm talking to, Fred or John or Susie, right? It's like what's Susie gonna agree with without compromising how you approach it, but also knowing that you've got to get Susie to say yes so you can pay the rent, right? Pay the mortgage.
Yeah. I always, I think about being being self-employed and being a whatever, whether it's a solopreneur or just a small business owner. When you're the owner, I work for an idiot has a whole different meaning.
Yeah. Yep.
I I work for me and I'm an idiot. It's one thing when my boss in Omaha, Nebraska was like, "Hey, fill out this TPS report." It's another thing where I'm like, "Man, I got to do this for real?" It's just a different feeling.
Well,
So,
and that's the good best point you just said there, like, underlies the words, the do it, right? Like, always, especially if you're a strategic person and you think, "Hey, I've got a better thought or a better approach," and somebody just comes to you, you get presented a thing at a meeting or an email or whatever. You don't see all the background of the decisions and, the options that went into choosing that path, and so you're like instantly go, "Yeah, that was the wrong way. I would have done it this way." Well,
right.
you also have to do it, right? So you can have
Yeah.
the thought, and then you're like, Do I really want to sit here and click those buttons and do those things?" So it's far different to apply the thoughts and the strategy when you're on your own.
Yeah. Now, is Bullpen the first business that you've started and owned?
Entirely myself, yes. So when uh, I had always kind of had freelance projects on the side, passion things,
Right.
friends, family, sort of, can't afford to pay, the full daily rate. So let's do stuff on nights and weekends for that. So I had been doing that for almost the entirety of my time in marketing, 15 years. But during COVID, I got let go, due to work from home and all the things, tied into that when that first started, and started doing a freelance project with a couple friends. I don't, you maybe have had him on, but Jared Jewett and his
Yeah.
wife Lori started
Yep.
1909 Digital. They kind of got caught up in some COVID stuff and decided they were going to start their own thing and do it better. So we started working on a project, and then a few months in, their third co-founder basically had to go find a full-time job because his wife got caught up in a COVID layoff. So um, I was positioned to sort of join them in an ownership role, and so um, we basically they were about 3 or 4 months in, and I joined in a co-owner seat there. So did that for about 3 years. So this is technically a second thing, but they did all the hard work. I got to come in a few months in after there was enough clients to pay some other people, and definitely came in at a different level to grow as opposed to start. And it's been the interesting differences there, but kind of my second go around.
So, when you think about that, because you've been around marketing for a while and you've been around business for a while, and then you were, part of a business as an owner, but not you didn't kick it off. You didn't have to get the flywheel spinning. You didn't have what are some of the things, because this is really the people that listen to this are first time business owners, aspiring business owners. What are some of the things that you've learned since starting Bullpen that you didn't think you needed to know based on prior experience?
Yeah, not as much as what I needed to know, but what I've realized. And the first thing is just listen to other people that have done exactly what you've done. I've met lots of and had coffees and lunches with people and listen fairly well, but also like you just think like you know what you're talking about. It says your lane, you know what you're doing, and almost to a T, all of the feedback I had gotten before that I didn't ignore, but maybe didn't take to heart has all come true. They've been there and done that. So definitely listen and apply when people try to tell you stuff. Um, but the interesting thing about especially being on your own again, I walked in 3 or 4 months into somebody that had let's call it a handful of clients at the time. Um, and so our biz dev efforts and what we were doing to generate pipeline and what we were doing already had we had some referrals built in again that there was some momentum there, and so we grew it along with me. But when you're on your own it feels like you're overcommitting, and so just understanding how much time that you want to put in from like a delivery work standpoint when it's a single solopreneur business, um, or were you trying to grow it, right? And so what you're trying to do really dictates how much pipeline, how much work you want to do. So at the start, my assumption was because I had a couple, I had walked into this with a client, got another couple clients pretty early on that had some runway to them, not just short term projects. So I was like, I'm busy working, and so it felt like I was doing the right thing and I was good, and I didn't need to keep selling pipeline. I didn't need to keep it going because I didn't want any of those people, because you always tell yourself, well, if they say yes, I'm screwed, right?
Yeah.
I'm full working. If they say yes, I don't have any more time to give to work, and I didn't want to grow to other people. So I knew that, but that allowed me to like ignore the hard part, ignore the pipeline and the sales and the messaging and positioning because I was just doing the work. And so I was pretty radio silent publicly, even as a marketing person, I wasn't doing marketing. I wasn't out really pushing sales. I was taking referrals. And then when those things end, now you're stuck. And so that's the biggest thing that I learned on the solo side. When you've got, we had 4, 5, 6 people at 1909. Each one of those people are bringing in referrals and they've got awareness, and as they're posting things. When you're on your own, unless you're out doing the networking, doing shaking the trees, you're not going to get people to. Yeah, I thought I was going to put an announcement out, and everybody that's again, I've known people like you forever, and they would just see this in their feed, and magically they go, "Oh, I've always loved to work with you. Let's talk." And it was good for comments on Facebook and LinkedIn, but it didn't get you much more than that.
Yeah, Lorraine Ball's quote is, "You're not in the business you think you're in the business of selling the business you think you're in." And if
Good
you
point.
forget that, then you don't have a business.
Yep. And if you're not, and a lot of people are great practitioners and could
Yes.
could be freelance, and there are so that kind of starts to help you figure out what you go to market, right? If you're a practitioner and like to do it, I talked to somebody yesterday who's using Upwork as like a really go to market channel because he's already determined that, well, people in that space have budget. Now they're looking for something maybe different than he's selling, and so he's out there trying to kind of switch them around, but at least he's determined those people have budget, which is great. But if you're a practitioner versus somebody that is even comfortable selling, comfortable talking about themselves, it's far, far different than you sitting there and have your projects to work on than having to go find those projects.
Yeah. Yeah. From a, I guess from a person who, I mean, we all have conversations with people, but you've been self-employed, you've been employed by others, you look around every once in a while, I'm guessing somebody comes to you and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting my own thing." When somebody says, "I'm thinking about starting my own thing," what's your response or advice to them?
I usually pretty blindly tell them just to go if you're at that point that you've thought about it. There's some underlying reason that means whatever you're doing day to day is probably not great for any number of things, mental health or the delivery that the services you're providing to whoever's employed. There's something missing, right? So I pretty much always say jump first of all, um, and then just try to help them figure out, again, sort of share those lessons and learnings that I, sometimes ignored from others. But I really think the biggest thing that I see, and this is more less on like the solopreneur freelance, the marketing delivery side, but more just on the small business in general side, is many people will start a thing that they have passion about, and you've talked a lot about that. Um, that maybe people don't need, right? There are many times either, and so I have again, my background more recently was around strategy and go to market and those sorts of things. And I really enjoyed that. I have been doing it most recently and came to find out that was a much tougher sell. And for various reasons, it just wasn't going to fit with a solo shop being able to sell that work. And so I've again kind of recently shifted the messaging a little bit. I've always been more on the technical side. And so I've led with that because that's what people have been approaching me about because they knew me about that. But for a year, I was kind of bashing my head against the wall trying to sell a thing that I liked and I had passion for that nobody really wanted to pay me for or
That
thought they were
matters.
needing. Yeah, and so that happens all the time. And so you can say I want to start a thing, and it's like, okay, but what's your positioning? What's unique to you? How what do people know you for, and will they pay you for that? So that's the start that a lot of people miss is you could, again, and it's easier these days with those third party platforms, Fiverr, Upwork, stuff like that. And you can go find people who will give you money for the thing you're doing, but then you're just in a delivery freelance position as opposed to like a business owner. So you really have to ask yourself, do I want to be a business owner and build a thing? And do I want it to be myself or do I want to bring in others? Or am I just going to go deliver at what I'm good at and try and find that type of work. That's the biggest thing that people have to figure out, I think.
Yeah. If 2025 Chris could sit down the night before you opened up in 2024 Chris, you're sitting next to each other having the beverage of your choice, and 2025 Chris says, "Hey, listen, it all works out. You'll be fine, but here's what you need to focus on first tomorrow." What would you focus on first?
I very, very first thing is what is your offer? Who are you? Like, what is your unique thing that either people currently know you for, or that that people, when they hear it or see it, like, you'll pass the smell test, right? You could say whatever you want, but do you understand it? Do you know? It's like, so that's the absolute first thing, is figure out who you are, what's your offer, what's your positioning, how are you going to go out into the market? Um, because without that, you can waste a lot of time with people that know you well. And so I'd spent a year doing that. Go back to people I've talked to forever. Hey, Matt, haven't talked to you in 15 years, like, personally, but we've kept up online. You kind of know what I'm doing. You sort of know me. Want to pay me some money for some stuff? And you're like, sure, but what do I pay you for? And I'm like, well, I don't know. What do you need? And so that was literally 12 months of like, well, what do you need? And you're like, I really don't need to pay anybody else. I just have 17 things, but unless you tell me how I can put you in my brain of where you fit, and then that just fizzles away, and messages get missed, and next thing you know, you talk a year later. So yeah, that's the 100% 25 to 24 lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
being really specific on, on what you do and making sure that it's something somebody will pay for seems so elemental, and it is so hard.
Yeah. Yep.
So, all right, any other advice for somebody that's looking at starting a business? I mean, that's pretty good advice. You give them a lot of good advice.
Yeah, thank you. Been been down the wrong path many times. So
I
um
don't have enough time to make all the mistakes myself.
yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. If you're the I guess this is always old advice, but the best advice really is, if you're in a current role and it's not you can at least, like, wake up and stand to still go there and work. Start building your own thing then. Don't
Yes.
wait to leave and then figure it out. You go through your iterations again, ask the people, say, hey, I'm thinking of starting this. What would you pay for it? And again, nowadays, the good parts about the AI tooling in that space is you can get all of that research and all the information. Go ask what people are charging, figure out what they'll pay for, who's in the space. Again, do all of that work while you weren't employed. Um, and especially in the marketing digital space, many times your current employer might be your first client, or some projects that you're on, you might be able to, so again, even as I rolled off of full-time work, I stayed on a couple projects that I was on as a contractor. So
Yeah.
I off ramped full time into work, and so that happens a lot of times.
Yep.
So yeah, I would start doing that, and again, don't do it on the company time necessarily. Um,
Right.
but there's your runaway that you're currently currently employed,
Yeah.
especially these days, right?
Yep. So one last question, totally unwork related, but my favorite story over the last couple years. How is your daughter?
Oh, well, that's a great, thank you for that. She actually, they are down at a diabetes appointment at Riley Hospital right now. So she has been, just the synopsis. She had essentially, at about 3 years old, had her pancreas removed. She had acute pancreatitis, which is a thing that 3-year-olds don't have.
Yep.
Um, and even adults that have it, it's hard to diagnose, and they just assume you want pain meds and that you're hurting. It's just a hard thing to get to. So we got to that, finally went through a couple different hospitals, and got the University of Cincinnati Children's Hospital to say, "Yes, we'll do the surgery." She was the second or third youngest to have it done there, so it was a whole, big, long recovery, big thing. And so they took out her pancreas. And the interesting thing is that that essentially makes you diabetic right off the bat because you can't produce insulin. But the procedure is really cool where they actually take the insulin producing cells from your pancreas and put them into your liver, and they trick your liver into producing insulin for you. And so it's basically just it's just a matter of time before your insulin stops producing because it's not meant to do that. So it's just like a really cool way that they figured out how to do it. And so they had kind of told us about, puberty age, junior high, and she's literally started junior high in 2 weeks, and she's down there today. And it's like now, like right now, they're basically saying like, hey, she's gonna be back on insulin, but she's been insulin free. She's had monitors and things like that. But that's been about 8 years that
Yeah.
she went from not being able to eat. She was, fed through IV and tubes and all of those things. Couldn't go swimming. Couldn't really take baths. Couldn't go to school. All those things. To now 8 years. She's been 8 years without having to take insulin. Well, maybe 7 without insulin. Eating way too much. Growing. This
Being a
as
kid.
is just being a kid. So, yeah, so, if we had to trade, and we said this back then, right? We trade, being technically she's a type 3 diabetic, but essentially a type 1 diabetic, as opposed to not being a kid, was a good trade-off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so she's doing wonderfully. Thank you for asking.
Yeah. That it was just, I know that we're connected on Facebook, and watching her go through that, having a sick kid, it's freaking terrible. But what she was always smiling, always happy. And then she actually, got taken care of. That was awesome to watch. So
Yeah, yeah, thank
that's
you. Yeah,
that. Yeah.
she definitely helps keep things in perspective when somebody, says no or
Yes.
doesn't sign up to
Yeah.
sell with you, and you're like, "Oh, okay, well, I could have worse things going," so.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, listen, that's a quick 25 minutes. We're going to wrap up. I'm going to remind everybody, if you want to learn more about Chris and his business, you can go to the show notes. There'll be links and information on how to contact him. If you're listening, there's 3 ways you can help us grow: leave a review, hit subscribe, or share an episode. Chris, thanks for being a guest.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me, or thank you for everybody listening.
Yeah, no problem. And for the listeners, we'll be back next week with another episode of Default Profitable. Until then, stay focused, keep working, stay profitable.